Welcome to the You're Not Crazy podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in healing from narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way. You can connect with Jessica and find additional resources, content, and coaching at emotionalabusecoach.com.
Hello, and thank you for being here. Before we dive in, I want to go through the fine print and share how we can work together. Because healing from this kind of pain takes a lot more than time. It takes the right kind of support. I work with people entangling themselves from emotionally abusive relationships, coercive control, trauma bonds, high conflict co-parenting dynamics, high conflict divorce, and if you're at the beginning of the road and wondering what divorce would look like. I offer one-on-one coaching at every stage. If you're still in the relationship, if you're unsure if it's abuse, if you know it's abuse but you're having trouble understanding what that looks like, or what to do with it, I can help you name what's happening, start setting boundaries that work for you, and figure out what you need. If you're thinking about leaving, we'll explore what that might look like in a grounded and personalized way. If you're navigating divorce or custody or co-parenting with a high conflict person, I can help you document, strategize, and stay emotionally anchored, especially when you're being gaslit, discredited, and re-traumatized by the legal system. If you've already left and you're stuck in the trauma bond, or if you've been discarded and struggling to feel like yourself again, I can help you rebuild self-trust and reconnect with your own nervous system in a way that actually feels doable. Everything I do is highly personalized. I don't walk you through a one-size-fits-all program. I listen, I reflect, and I guide you based on what you're facing right now. And some people work with me through a one-time validation call, which is offered on my website, where we zero in on one issue you're struggling with and start to untangle it together. Others work with me on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on what's going on in your specific situation. And this is especially helpful when healing from emotional abuse and also in divorce. If you're curious about starting, I offer a $25 intro call, which if you listen to my older episodes, I call it a clarity call. It used to be free, and I talk about it at a later episode, but really a lot of people were no-showing to those calls, and that was taking away time from clients that I do work one-on-one with. And so if we move forward, I just take that fee and apply it to your first session. That intro call is just for us to get on the same page so you can share what's going on for you and I can share how I might be able to help. I only take a limited number of those calls per month because one-on-one coaching is the core of my work. Out of all these offerings that I have, one-on-one coaching is the thing that I do the most, and I do it 6 days a week most of the time, 5 to 6 days a week. And so if my calendar looks full and if there's not a time that you can get in, you can email me at jessicaknightcoaching.com, and I always try and make space where I can. And I may also always have a few openings from one-on-one client reschedules. You can also explore self-paced courses and toolkits at jessicaknight.thinkific.com, including Divorcing a Narcissist 101 and the Emotional Abuse Breakthrough course. I have a documentation course and my new signature program, Unhooked, which is a private podcast and course that walks you through the full cycle of abuse, helps you map it in your relationship and how to break it and how to begin to see what it really is that you're going through. If you want ongoing support in a more flexible way, you could always check out my Substack at jessicaknight.substack.com. Each month I focus on a different theme, from trauma bonding to divorce to cluster B to sexual coercion to emotional abuse to toxic breakups. Those are just some from this year. Paid members get access to monthly deep dives, master classes, Q&As, strategy kits, and I'm working on some more group options. There is also a free option and a monthly option. So please head over to Substack. The link is in my show notes. You also can just search Jessica Knight Coaching and I'll come up. Everything that I create is meant to help. My coaching, my writing, my courses, this podcast, it's built around the one truth that you're not crazy. You are conditioned to doubt your reality, and I want to help you change that and understand what you're going through. If you like this podcast, the best thing that you can do is subscribe and rate the episode 5 stars. You can find me on my websites, emotionalabusecoach.com and high-conflict divorcecoaching.com. All of the offerings that I just mentioned are also in the show notes below. Now let's get to the episode. Today I want to talk about a theme that's come up in my client calls this week, actually the past 2 weeks, and it's about the discard. And usually when we think about the discard, which is usually the end of a relationship with a narcissist, we think about it as being we're ghosted or blocked on everything, replaced instantly, blamed for all of it. And it's usually really loud and cruel and meant to destabilize you. It's like this final blow that says you're not useful for me anymore and you're going to pay for it. And when this happened, I saw it was happening and I let it happen because that was the only way I knew I was going to get out of this relationship. I was talking with the client this week and I said, yeah, I let him discard. And I said I held so many boundaries for months and it was getting a bit explosive because I kept holding the boundary. And in my case, I have my daughter like more than 90% of the time. And so there's a lot of boundaries and she needs a lot of me and I work for myself. And so I remember he would blame me all the time and have all these expectations of me of what that would look like when my life was the same. And it just was like, I just kept setting boundaries around it because I wouldn't let him put boundaries on my own relationship with my daughter, no matter what. And that's like also like, he's a single dad, I'm a single mom. We entered this relationship with that understanding. And like, when I started to realize that like, he felt like he was in competition with my kid, not only did it make me sick, I was like, no. And I've been, since my first emotionally abusive relationship, I understand what boundaries are and I can hold them. And so I would set boundaries like I can't answer the phone right now. I'm doing this. Then he would text me or text me 9 times and say like, you need to answer me or like, you need to pick up or like, why aren't you answering? And I'm like, well, because I said I wasn't available, and then I would not be available because I said I wasn't available. And all that pressure didn't work. And once we were getting to the end of this relationship, I just felt like I could not hold a boundary without him exploding. And when the discard finally came, it came after months of this, of me refusing to perform this emotional labor on command. I was super protective of my daughter's routines, our peace, my mental capacity, and my emotional capacity. And he didn't like that I didn't just collapse to regulate his mood. He didn't like that I was steady and I had like regulation techniques for myself. And the discard that came wasn't like the one that we see or that we hear about in narcissistic abuse. It came with silence. It came with stonewalling. And he stonewalled and it disguised it as him being hurt. And it came after I said no to abandoning myself and like really made a bigger move, a bigger decision. And for that, I became the villain in his story. And to be clear, I didn't end the relationship. I actually tried to. Literally 2 weeks before, I said I was completely done. I'm not doing this. He begged me in tears, giving me literally anything to stay. And I said, I will give one more chance, but I need space. And I just stopped betraying myself to stay, though. So I took the space and he just couldn't tolerate it. So he discarded me. And I was discarded at the moment I stopped being pliable to him. And I think I was not pliable for a long time, but he saw it that way. And this discard didn't come with like a final slam. It came with a withholding. It was like
Did I just imagine that? Like, did that really happen? Because when somebody discards you through silence or indifference and withdrawal, it leaves no scene or no like issue to point to, just a feeling that like this feels so weird, but it's over. And it was because he expected emotional responsiveness from me on demand, even if I wasn't like physically or mentally available. If he sent a series of texts and the last one said, I love you, he'd ask why that wasn't the first one I replied to when I finally replied. Every interaction felt like a test. And that whole I love you text example, I can't tell you how many times it happened. I would be driving and like my phone would be, like on the Bluetooth buzzing off. And then, I would like either pull over or stop at it, or if I was at a red light, look at the be like, is this an emergency? And it'd be like, no, he's just demanding my attention. And then if I didn't reply to the I love you before I replied to like the logistical questions that in theory needed an answer before the I love you, I got shamed and told that I don't appreciate him and I don't appreciate his version of love and something must be wrong if I'm not responding to that first. And it was like every single thing was a trap. It got to a point where I just stopped responding. And I used to think when I was in it that this was just emotional immaturity, but it was like constant emotional surveillance, like monitoring my tone, my timing, my priorities. And every test was rigged for failure. It was because the goal was not to communicate with me or to understand me. It was to see how much compliance he could get out of me, which was crazy because when he met me and asked me to get coffee to talk, I gave him a date 30 weeks away because that's literally the next time I was free to do that and could actually be present. And so to be in this place where I'm getting demanded to even answer when I'm driving my child home from gymnastics was like crazy. And he always created chaos before I had time with my daughter alone. And this time that the discard happened, it was no different. There was always chaos before I traveled. And my family is in New York. So I would go to New York, like not too often, but often enough, and meanwhile, when he went to London to get 3 tattoos in one weekend, I had no issues. And I was like, okay, let me know when your flight lands. But when I went to New York with my daughter and then ended up seeing friends, it turned into, I can't believe that you like didn't come back early to see me. And I'm like, well, I see you every day, pretty much. And I don't see my friends every day. Or it was like, it just feels like I remember one time I went to Disney with him, his son, my daughter, and it was a quicker trip. And my daughter and I stayed a few days later because it was our trip that we had booked previously. And then he was upset that I didn't rebook my flight when he pushed me to leave at 6 a.m. when I was at Epcot watching the fireworks with my kid at like 8:30. And he's telling me that it's responsible if I leave right now. And then I changed my flight to get on 6 because it's going to rain the next day. And I'm like, it's Florida. It rains every day. And also, why am I going to do that to my kid? We're here. We're watching the fireworks. And what am I doing? Fighting with you about how I must come back earlier for what? Because my flight might get delayed. That's my problem. Then we do something else. But like, it just felt like there was no way I could just be myself. And he really had a thing about trips. And I had this trip that I planned with my daughter, just the two of us. And as I was getting closer to the trip, I needed the space and we needed the space. And right before we left, he was stirring up conflict. And I was extremely clear. I was like, look, I'm available on Wednesday. We leave on Friday at like, I don't know, it was around noon. And I was like, so, and Thursday, I'm jam packed because I am taking the time off when I'm with her there. And that Wednesday, he came and he like went to hug me. It was at night. I was super duper tired, but I was like, okay, I know if I don't spend time with him, he's going to have a freak out. And so I was like in my pajamas and I was hoping we were just going to like watch a movie or something. And he came in as I was like pouring myself a glass of water. And then he comes and hugs me behind my back. And like, I'm holding the Brita that's full. And I'm just like, can I just pour this water? And then he's like, see, you're always rejecting me. And I said, can I please just finish pouring the water? Like, I think because I overloaded my clients that day, I think I was like, I was toast, to be honest. And he looks at me and goes, we can't come back from this. That I was abandoning him emotionally. And I go, if we can't survive, or if you can't survive a week apart, we have a much bigger issue. And he walked out. He didn't want a resolution. He wanted to claim that space in my psyche so that I couldn't access joy. I couldn't access water. Like, I don't even think I ate dinner that night because it was just so busy and I couldn't be present with my daughter. It's like I couldn't breathe without him inhabiting my emotional airspace. And so the next day I chose not to caretake this. Like, he left, he did this emotional thing. I'm sure he wanted me to like chase him emotionally, but I was so tired and it was 9:30 and I had to be up at 6 to get my kid to school the next day. And I was like, I'm done doing this. I'm not reaching out. I'm not telling him that I'm mad. I am not caretaking this. And I'm also not letting this ruin my trip. I see what is happening and that's it. And the next day, he basically just reached out to see if I had an apology. And I was like, no. And then I went on the trip. And that morning of that trip, I was thinking, like, what do I do? I'm like, but I knew if I went to his house, or his apartment rather, that I would not leave. Like, not that I wouldn't leave and not go on the trip, but I would be rushing because he didn't respect time. He didn't respect my time. Now I knew he had this whole thing because there's been no resolution. So he has created now a 2-day story. And it was rare that he went 2 days without like resolving something because he was like so anxious and feared abandonment that I was like, okay, now that we've gone this long, we have a problem. But I kept putting my daughter first and in a way myself first because I was like, I have to get this kid to school. And then I have to, in my head, I have to get myself to the airport. I have to pack our stuff. I still have some things to do and I'm working. So that's what I did. I worked. I picked up my daughter. I got on the plane at one point because he lived next door to me. He was in his car and I like ran out to like throw a bag in my car and ran back in. And I remember having like a minute in between like one session to the next. And he like then texted me saying that he couldn't believe that I didn't come and say hi to him. And I was like, I can't believe that you didn't see that I was in a rush. And when I got on the plane, that's when I got the silence. And he stonewalled me for most of that trip. I got one word answers. I got really delayed cold replies. And I got a lot of emotionally punishing withdrawal. And when I told him that I didn't feel that great there because he asked how it was, he didn't ask if we're okay. He said, you're not prioritizing me. And I remember like mentally snapping and because I said, look, I'm at a museum. I'm not sure what we're going to do today. Like I'm having a hard time figuring it out. And then he was like, you're not talking to me. Like, you need to find time to fix this. And I just said, you're a grown man and I'm in a foreign country with my child and I cannot hold your emotions right now. That was the beginning of the end because if that was the first time I ever set that boundary and I said it that way, you might say, Jessica, that's kind of harsh. And I would have agreed. But if I told you that it was the probably 8th time that something happened around a trip and most of the trips he was actually on and still did this, I was at my peak and I was like really upset by the way he handled the 3 days before. I was coming across as being like more solid in my response because I was just done with it. But that was from exhaustion. That wasn't from me feeling like I need to hold my boundary really strong. It was from, I'm just done. I'm done with the cycle. Like I literally almost ended this relationship 2 weeks ago. And now here we are. Like he cannot go 2 weeks. So he basically stopped responding to me about anything. He had my dog. So like he had to respond to me a little bit. And I was really worried about that. And he wasn't answering me. He wasn't asking for okay. He literally stonewalled. And then I kind of knew what was happening, but I was having trouble wrapping my mind around it. But I was like, this is the discard. This is it. And I just decided I was going to let it happen because it was the only way I was going to get out of it. And I had to understand that he was going to make me the villain. And I chose not to fight it because every single text, because now the texts were coming in more, it was blame. And then if I said something like, that's gaslighting, and he would say, no, it's not. It's like, okay, well, isn't that gaslighting? And then if I said, like, do you see what you're doing? You're telling me how I need to act. And he was like, this is what a relationship looks like. It was as if like I was on trial, but I was on trial and that he was a prosecutor and the judge. And he literally was sending me lists on how I need to behave in the relationship, how I need to respond to his texts, what order to say I love you in, what tone to use, how I needed to accept his love and why I needed to see that it was quote unquote beautiful, when I'm like, it feels suffocating. And it really seemed like what he was doing was sending me a blueprint of how I need to behave. There was no curiosity about my needs, like no apology, no concern about me or my kid. It was just like, let me put you in a straitjacket and expect you to deal with it, even though he's been in a relationship with me for a long time and knew that I'm not that person. He didn't want a partner. He wanted me to be a mirror back on him. And he wanted me to be like an emotional regulation tool. He wanted me to be like emotional validation blow up doll. And it's like he wanted me to like co-sign all his delusions of being a misunderstood victim while doing all the work of his emotional self-regulation, mine, caretaking, and narrative control. And I sometimes look at those messages now still and wonder, who the hell did he think he was like talking to? Like I didn't, and I pushed back. I pushed back immediately. And then I was told that I was like this awful person. But when I was going through it, I saw it for what it was. I didn't fight it, but it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. And when I talk about it now, I probably sound like, you know, I can name the pattern. I can do it with sarcasm, and then I can reflect back. But I really do mean it when I say that this is not how I felt then. Like I had a really hard time keeping myself together. And then in a future episode, I'll talk about like how he tried to use coercive control after that, because it just really showed his true colors. It was every time that I didn't fall in line with what he wanted, even if I didn't agree to it, I wasn't okay. Like it wasn't okay. And I think the thing is that he didn't scream. He did ghost me. He flipped a switch. And all I could really think about was, I am not ever going to compromise time with my kid because of somebody's emotional dysregulation. When I finally said like, and he was like, you're not even making time to talk to me about this. I was like, because I'm in a hotel room with my daughter. I'm already like crying when she goes to sleep because this is crazy. You're upset with me that I'm not making time to like argue with you. Like this is you manufactured this. So no, I'm not going to step away from my kid. And I'm in a hotel room with my kid. She's going to hear me. Like she doesn't need to hear this going on. And I guess like when I look back at it now, there was a part of me that wasn't going to fight it this time. Because I guess like that was my first discard. But I've been in another situation and I was like, I was not going to do it. I was choosing my self-respect. And there was no closure after. It was just more punishment. I came home and we had a conversation and he said he wanted to work together. He said he couldn't be in the relationship that he was in. I kept pushing back saying like, I can't, but what I can't do is just like be in that thing that we were in. I'm willing to have a conversation because our kids are involved in this, but like, I can't do that. And the next day he blocked me. We had that conversation, we had sex, and then that was it. And that's kind of how he continued on. There's a lot of coercion, and I probably need to unpack that more after because it was a confusion. It was like this calculated re-engagement, but it was making me sick. And when I finally actually spoke about it or put a boundary up, he turned me into the absolute villain. But I was already the villain. I was always going to be the villain in his story. There was no way I was never not going to be the villain in his story. He needed me to be the villain in his story because it was the only way that he could keep his fragile ego. intact. He needed a story where he was this like wounded hero, the abandoned man, the victim of an emotionally withholding woman, because the alternative was like so unthinkable to him that he was the architect of this misery that he was creating. And he had to cast me as the problem. He had to cast me as the problem before I went. And then when he did his typical, like, I'm going to throw a bomb, you know, and you don't, and I didn't respond the same way because I was like, no, like, F this. It turned into, well, then he has to escalate. He has to find new things. But he was not going to face that he was cruel or controlling, or that he threw something away or created a situation that was toxic. It's something that I look at now and I can see as like a reverse betrayal. And like I didn't betray him. I just stopped betraying myself. And to someone who depends on me abandoning myself to like be with him, which is really sick and sad, he wanted to name me as emotionally distant or in all these things that are just not true. Like I said how I felt at one point in a message. I'm like, this is crazy. I don't know why you're doing this. I would not do this to you if you were away with your son. This would never happen. And his reply was, you can stop the blaming and shaming. I'm like, what? Like that's blaming would be like, not that. But a reason that I wanted to go through this is because so many people go through this too. And it's not a discard that is typically talked about. It's a discard that is much different. And I think that it's really hard to wrap your mind around because, and like I said, and I probably could say this a million times, like I had to swallow it. I would wait till my daughter went to bed and then I'd cry for hours. Like this was really sad. I was trauma bonded. I was resisting it and it was uncomfortable because I was so conscious of it. I wanted the relief so bad. I really did. But the relief meant abandoning myself and it meant abandoning my daughter. And I kept thinking, what would I be teaching her? And it was mortifying. And I didn't want to do that. And I wasn't going to do that. After the stonewalling and stuff, and then him breaking contact to send me a list of how I needed to behave, I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm not alive to receive a playbook of how you want me to act. And, you know, this brings me to like another part of it. It's that in these relationships, it's almost as if like they want to create who you are. And he wanted to create a different version of me. And it's not the version of the person he met. It's not the person that he was in a relationship with. It was the one that he could tolerate. And when I was so far on the other side, and I was so not regulating his emotions and dealing with his shit and caring about his reputation management, and like he needed the discard to be his so he could spin a story where he's the one abandoned, mistreated, when dealing with a woman who's just too much. So, but then comes the silencing. And it's because he wanted me to be somebody I'm not. And I don't understand how and why this happens, like from like a fundamental, my brain works, but he wanted me to be somebody that I'm not. And they call it mirroring because like, it's basically like when in love bombing, they'll show you that version of them that you would want. But I think when they're doing that, they're not even getting to know us. They're not even getting to know who you are. But they're just creating this version in your head. And then as time goes on and as they continue it, and as I'm more me and I'm not that version and I'm not that person, it's like he couldn't tolerate it. And so he flipped the script because I saw too much and because his behavior wasn't about miscommunication. And I was not going to perform any act of normalcy for something that wasn't normal. I was in pain. I was exhausted. I was hurt. I was a lot of things. And I wasn't dealing with this anymore. The outbursts were getting more. But, you know, I just let him discard. And I have talked about it before, that breaking the trauma bond, because I was trauma bonded. And it was like I had to untrain myself and uncondition myself to associate his version of love with rationality, especially as he kept projecting of how rational he was. And I know that you are probably listening to this thinking that, you know, I have all this clarity, but, you know, this was a couple of years ago. And so I do have that clarity now, but I really mean it when I say that, like, it really did throw me for a loop. It really did destroy me. And I'd be lying to you if I said that I didn't want him for a long time after that to come back, realize he messed everything up. And I think what I wanted was just that moment that he realized he did something wrong and that he like manufactured this. I wanted that self-awareness from him because then it would have validated my story, but I didn't want him. And I knew that because I didn't want that relationship. I didn't want a relationship where I was being given a script in various ways all the time about how to behave. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that if you've gone through this or are going through it, you can see it. And if a relationship isn't ending, if we don't know how to stop it, if like we keep trying to end it and the person keeps ignoring it, you may need to let the discard happen and to choose to feel the feelings. It doesn't mean it's easy. My body went through withdrawal. I was crying all the time. I was trying to make sense of my reality. But I will tell you now that I look back on that and there has never been a day, even the days that were really bad, that I have ever regretted letting the discard happen. Never. Even on like the worst trauma bond days or the nights that I couldn't sleep, not once did I ever regret it because I just kept reminding myself that I didn't want to be in a situation that was that volatile anymore. I knew that after that, what the relationship would have been him giving me sets of rules at various times. It would have been so much worse. And so I hope that this was helpful. I hope it was validating. And if you need support, all of my links are in the show notes. And you can always find me at emotionalabusecoach.com.